My name is Bob Lehman, and this is my wife. That's Janet, and as you can see, I'm married out of my league. I'm so glad, though, that I could be here and be a part. I actually met Janet at NAU. My major is zoology. My minor is chemistry, which naturally qualifies me to be speaking here this morning to you guys. But it is absolutely, it's a really, really neat pleasure. Can I just be totally honest with you guys, which is kind of weird because when you say that, you're assuming you're not being honest. But anyway, let me be totally honest. You know, I don't know why we all gather together, whether it's a church or a gathering, whatever it is. I always like to encourage people to come with one thing in mind. Just asking yourself the question, what is it that God probably is going to tell me today? It may be just one thing. And whether you're part of church world or this is new to you or whatever, I want you to kind of have that mentality that says, okay, there may be 2 or 3 points that Bob's going to talk about, but what's this one thing that I can take and apply to my life this year, this semester, this day? And that's kind of what we want to do, you know, with this. This is really kind of a fun series. You know, Love Like That is just kind of a cool kind of thing. But let me tell you, I came to know Jesus, to be a Christ follower when I was in college. And I tell you, Janet had been a follower of Jesus for a lot of years. And, you know, so it wasn't new to her, but everything was new to me. Okay, absolutely everything. And so, you know, I just kind of got involved in Bible study, got involved in a campus ministry, and it was great and all those kind of things. And I kind of felt like God was maybe calling me into full-time ministry. Big, crazy kind of decision and stuff. So off we go to grad school. I don't know nothing. And I'm at grad school, and the church that I was attending, they said, hey, would you mind coming and just sharing with this Wednesday night group of people something from the Bible, okay? Now, back in that day, Wednesday night, I mean, it was people who had been believers, followers of Jesus longer than I'd been alive. And they wanted me to come and share with these people. And there were like 70, 80, 90 people, a lot of people that were gathered there and so on. I didn't know what I was going to say. I was really nervous. And there was a guy who was mentoring me. And I went to him and I said, listen, I don't think I have anything of value to share with these people. And this is my friend. This is my mentor. This is my coach. He comes alongside me and he says, you're right. I don't think you have anything of value to share with anybody. And I'm just like, oh, no. And then he said, but I think God might have something to say through you. I mean, the grace that he extended to me. So now I go before all these people, 70 years old, 80 years old. I think there's a guy who's 90 years old. They're all there. And I'm talking on something that's so basic. It's like an ABC, John 3:16 kind of thing. And I'm just sharing it. I'm doing it with all my heart and all these kind of things. And I'm all done. I'm sure everybody knew everything that I said. No new information for them. And almost to a person, they all came up to me. And they said, oh, Bob, that was so awesome. That was so exciting. Which, for those of you who have been following Jesus for some period of time, kind of a good reminder that when you're pouring into somebody and some guy comes up to you that just is kind of learning the whole deal, and they come up and they say, hey, I found this verse. It's the coolest verse in the world. I bet you don't even know what it is. It's John 3:16. You can react one of 2 ways. You can say, oh, John 3:16, everybody knows that. Or you could be like these people were. John 3:16, whoa, show it to me, man. And they feel the grace, and there's almost an electricity that you can feel as somebody extends that into your life. Well, this is kind of the thing that I wanted to share today. How in the world do you and I live a graceful life? Not just graceful, graceful kind of life. And that's what we're going to talk about. You know, a couple of weeks ago, you talked about how to be mindful like Jesus. And I think, Megan, you talked a little bit about how to be approachable like Jesus. Today, it's how to be graceful like Jesus. Because here's the bottom line. I want to love like Jesus. And so do you. Whether you know it or not, you want to do that too. Because there's something inside of you that gravitates toward having good relationships. As a matter of fact, I have found that this is true. Whether you're going to be a ditch digger, whether you're going to be a scientist, whether you're going to be a pastor, I don't care what it is you're going to be. If you're good at building relationships, you'll be successful. And if you're bad at it, you'll probably struggle. And part of this whole teaching on loving like Jesus is learning how to build relationships at the core. Today is all about that. As a matter of fact, there's a passage that this whole series is based on, okay? And it's found in the book of Ephesians, okay? And I just kind of, in terms of introduction, I want us to look at that, but I want to look in the Message paraphrase. It's totally cool. It really, really is good. And I just want to read it to you, okay? We'll put it up on the screen. It's this. Watch what God does, and then do it. Like children who learn proper behavior from their parents. Mostly what God does is love you. Keep company with him and learn a life of love. Observe how Christ loved us. His love was not cautious, but extravagant. He didn't love in order to get something from us, but to give everything of himself to us. Love like that. Man, I think if I had a tat, I might do that, except it would just kind of fill my whole arm. It's good stuff. And this idea of being graceful today, so if you're taking notes, you might want to just jot down this. And this is something that I didn't really understand, but this is it. The first thing is simply that grace that we're going to talk about and judgment, believe it or not, are connected. They just are. And intuitively, you all know that. We do. And by the way, this idea of graceful is not a word that we use commonly. Unless we use it as to kind of put somebody down. You know, somebody trips, you know, and you say, hey, way to go, Grace, you know, or, you know, we'll do something like that. But it's kind of an old school kind of word, grace. The idea, though, is cool. Not only do we not use that word grace very often today, more importantly, we don't do the word today. To be graceful, to act in a graceful kind of way. And here's the reason why. The main reason is this. We want people to earn our respect. All of us do. We want that. Why give anything out for free? People need to win my acceptance. I don't want to extend anything to them. And here's the deal. In the job market, we understand that. Because you are evaluated on your performance, what you do. If you don't do well, you don't get the raise. So we are living in kind of a culture that this idea of extending grace to someone without any kind of cost or something coming back to you is just basically unheard of today. Even though, if you're somewhat a little familiar with the scriptures, there's something intuitively you get. Jesus is talking, and he's talking during what's called the Sermon on the Mount, okay? 3 chapters in the book of Matthew and found in different places, and it's kind of like schools in session. Most of the time when Jesus taught, he taught out of the context of life. He'd be walking down the street with one of us, okay? He'd be walking down there, and he'd say, hey, you see that tree? That reminds me of the kingdom of God. Let me tell you why. That's how he taught most of the time. But here in the Sermon on the Mount, it was different. This was very much like in a college campus like this. It was sitting down, people listening to him, and he taught on a variety of subjects. He talked about sex, he talked about giving, he talked about prayer, he talked about all sorts of things. And when you come to Matthew chapter 7, he talks about a biggie, judgment. And this is what he says. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Now let me give you a definition of judging, okay? Judging has so much negative connotation, but it literally means, ready, to form an opinion or a conclusion about something or someone. Okay, that necessarily, or not necessarily, is bad, but it can be. To have an opinion. But here's the thing that Jesus does right here. He connects this, a connection of how you and I form our opinion about somebody else, okay, and how God forms an opinion about you. This is so interesting. How we form an opinion about somebody else, God uses that information to form an opinion about you and me. It's fascinating because this is what he says. He says, in the same way, and literally that in the same manner, using the same criteria, using the same metrics, the way you judge others, you're going to be judged. I don't like that. I don't think any of us do. Because I know what I'm made of. And just to make sure that Jesus wanted to make sure that everybody kind of understood what was going on, he goes on. And whether you're part of church world or not, you probably know this next part. Because we see sitcoms about it. We see all sorts of things about it because it goes on in verse 3. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You know what this does? This also is the classic picture and definition of a phony or a hypocrite. You know, you accurately maybe form an opinion about someone else, but you inaccurately form an opinion about yourself. You judge other people, I judge other people, but I don't use the same standard. We don't use the same standard on others that we use on ourselves. In fact, somebody said it this way, listen to this. We judge others by their actions, that we judge ourselves by our intentions. Did you see what that dude did? Man, can you believe that he did that? Yeah, but you did it too, Bob. Yeah, but I didn't mean it. That was not my intention. But did you see what he did? Do you see how we do that? We kind of do the action thing and judge people and actions over here. But when we end up doing exactly the same thing, and most of us always do, we kind of judge ourselves by, well, my intention was not that. That's kind of how we look at it. As a matter of fact, let me give some key definitions, okay? Key definitions. These are theological definitions, really. Let me give you the definition of justice. Justice is getting what you deserve. I just got what I deserve. Anyway, justice is getting what you deserve. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. But grace is getting what you could never earn or deserve. Isn't that beautiful? You know, judgment is getting what you deserve, dude. Mercy is, well, you're not going to get what you deserve. But grace is giving to you something you could never earn or never deserve. There's a story in the Bible. It's a story of the prodigal son. Again, it's one of those stories that whether you're part of the church or church world or this is all new to you, you probably heard something about the prodigal son. This dude takes all the money from his dad, squanders it all, you know, and you know, he comes back thinking hopefully he could just be like a slave to his dad. And instead his dad just embraces him, loves on him, throws a party, does all these kind of things. It's a great story. It's an amazing story. In fact, the way Jesus compels us when he teaches is so awesome. He'd get a group of people like this together, and some believe this and some believe that, and he'd tell a story, and he'd get everybody in the room nodding. Oh yeah, right on. Whatever you're saying, I'm really agreeing, man. If I was a dad, I know what I was going to do, and they're all agreeing in their head. And then he'd bring the punchline. And he said, instead of just, rejecting the son, the dad just says, come on, let's throw a party. Let me give you a robe. You're welcome back. I love you. I just love that. Well, there's an author named Max Lucado, and he said this: mercy gave the prodigal son a second chance, but grace gave him a feast, a party. Mercy gave the prodigal son a second chance. Come on home, son. But grace gave him a feast. You come home and we're gonna have a party. It's gonna be great. Let me give you a second thing if you're taking notes. Second thing you want to write down is that grace is inherently unfair. Grace is just absolutely inherently unfair. By grace, I mean giving somebody what they don't earn or what they don't deserve. Seems totally unfair. It's so true. If you want to love like Jesus, though, you cannot limit your love to people who deserve it. And this is so hard to do. I want us to look at a passage this morning, and it's found in the Gospel of John, chapter 8. It's kind of a familiar passage. And this is what it says. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, and at dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. And the law of Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. Now, what do you say?" And they were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. And when they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and he said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Let's stop right there. This woman was caught in the very act of adultery. She wasn't just accused, she was caught in the act. This was a trap, according to this passage here. And the Pharisees, or the religious folk there of the day, they were trying to find a way to trap Jesus, to get rid of him, and so on. So I believe they probably were following this couple around, okay? This is my opinion. And followed, and pretty soon, after a little while, busted down the door. They threw the sheets off. There they are. Grabbed this woman. I believe they grabbed her and took her out, and probably didn't have any clothes or anything like that, which is, by the way, crazy in that they didn't take the guy out too, because according to the Old Testament, he was just as guilty. But they're trying to trap Jesus, so they bring out the woman and so on. Totally not fair, all that kind of stuff. And then these people started quoting Old Testament scriptures to Jesus. They said, "Hey, the law says this," which is never a good idea, to quote scriptures to the guy who put the scriptures together, Jesus. So they're quoting this, they're doing this. It says that, and what they said, by the way, was true. In Leviticus 16, anybody caught in adultery can be stoned to death. That's what it actually said in the Old Testament there. But watch what happens, verse 7. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up. He said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Listen to this. Why did they go home? Weren't they right? Weren't they correct? They had the truth on their side. Leviticus chapter 16. We got it. We got them, and this is it. They had, what stopped them? Believe it or not, the answer is the truth. The same truth that brought them to that place where they thought they had the right to attack what others had done in their lives stopped them dead in their tracks. Because here's the truth. If those are the rules you want to play by, we can play by those rules. But the truth is, they were also guilty, because they weren't getting what they deserved as well. I don't know about you guys, But I think a principle here is we can use the truth as a weapon to destroy people if we're not careful. To turn them into a frisbee, to just mess with their lives and so on. We can use that truth. Okay, everybody's going to get what they deserve. Anybody want to play by those rules? I don't. I don't, because I know what's going on in here. And if it's going on here with me, chances are it's going on there with you too. This whole crowd, well, let's get them all what they deserve. I'm out. I don't want to do that. By the way, have you ever wondered what Jesus was writing on the dirt? I don't know what he was, I can speculate. But I can imagine, I'm going off camera, I can imagine he kind of stoops down and he starts writing. Maybe he's writing your secretary. Maybe he's writing pornography. Maybe he's writing anger. Maybe he's writing you cheated at the marketplace. I think he wrote down things that other people were probably guilty of. And as people looked at it and said, oh my goodness, he knows about her. He knows about him. He knows about what So if we're going to play by the rules that everybody gets what they deserve, justice, that's just the way it is, then that means everybody is guilty. Well, a lot of us kind of stopped the story right there. And the takeaway is basically don't throw stones because we all make mistakes, so just don't judge me. But he's not done yet. The crowd's gone. It's just Jesus and the woman standing there. And then this is what Jesus says, verse 10. Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. This is really important. This may be the one thing that you want to take home with you or whatever it is. This is a part of the story that often gets left out. Jesus said, neither do I condemn you. Listen, come here. The one person who had the right to condemn someone didn't. He was the only one who really had the right to do it. He's Jesus, for goodness sakes. And he says, neither do I. I don't know what that does for you guys. You know what that does for me? It does this. That's what it does. Wow. Because I know what I'm really like. There's not one of us in this room that wants our life put up in front of everybody. Because we've all blown it. Every one of us. That's called grace, guys. That's called grace. He could have condemned her. He could have picked up a stone and he'd be the only one who could have done it. But he didn't. Grace is getting what you need and not what you deserve. Jesus is saying, I could condemn you, but instead I'm going to give you something better. I'm giving you what you need, not what you deserve. And then the conversation isn't over because Jesus is loving and graceful. So he says, go and sin no more. In other words, from now on, you just can't live that kind of life anymore. Because she was living her life apart from what God says is best for her. Some of you have kids. Some of you have brothers, sisters. Some of you have cousins and nieces and so on. And at the heart of what you want for them is the best. You want the best for them so badly that you're involved in their life intimately because you want the best. And here's Jesus saying, go now. I'm not going to condemn you. but leave the life that you've been living. Because I want the best for you. So he offers this incredible grace, and it's just incredible. I want something better for you. So I'm always asking myself the question, I've had a life, I have a past, I have a present. And some of you, even though God has been extending grace to you, for one reason or another, it's very hard for you to receive that grace. Because the one condemning you is not somebody else. The one condemning you is yourself. Bob, if you really knew me, if you really knew my past, if you really knew what's going on. Here's the deal. Jesus does. He does. He gets it more than you and I get it. And he extends this grace for us to live in. When you encounter somebody who's caught up in something, how do you interact with them? Do you acknowledge it's wrong, but then extend grace just like Jesus did? Which brings us to the third point, and it's kind of like the second one. Grace doesn't make sense to us. I mentioned that Jesus often taught in the parables and all those kind of things and so on. I'd like you to consider a parable that he tells in Matthew chapter 20. In Matthew 20, this is a story of the workman in the vineyard. And of all the parables that there are that Jesus talked about, this is the one that irritates me the most. By the way, I think when you read the scriptures, you ought to get irritated from time to time. Yeah. How do I, just kind of almost like, what in the world was he getting at here? And this is one of those. I'm not going to read it, but he's teaching about the kingdom of heaven. And as he's teaching about the kingdom of heaven, he says, hey, this dude owned, a vineyard. And it needed to be taken care of. It needed to be, everything picked. So he hired people at the very beginning of the day, kind of like day workers, And so he hired them and promised them a denarius, a day's wage. Then a few hours later, he goes out again and he gets some more people. And he promises them, I'll pay you a denarius. At noon, he does the same thing. He gathers a bunch of other people and he promises them a denarius. In an hour, that's crazy. An hour. I got to be careful here. I got stitches on my head, man. An hour before quitting time, he hires some more people. And he promises them, say it with me, a denarius, a day's wage. Finally, it's time to pay everybody at the end of the day, Everybody comes up and he pays what he promised, a denarius, right? And everybody is happy, right? Yeah, wrong. Who are the people who are bent out of shape? The people who started at the beginning of the day. And Jesus said, wait. What did I promise you? Well, you promised a denarius. Did I pay it? Yeah. The person who owns the vineyard can do whatever he says and whatever he promised. But this strikes at the heart of grace and why it's so hard for us as Americans. Because these guys worked harder than these guys. My stepdad passed away a few years back. Really great man. He poured into me and was just a really, really great man. But he didn't have a relationship with God at all. He was still a great man. Loved him dearly, dearly. And when he was very old, he got cancer. And 3 months before he passed away, I can remember going over to the house and crawling into the bed with him just to be there close to him because he couldn't really do much. And in the process, I once again told him about life in Jesus Christ. And what a relationship to Jesus will secure for him. Heaven. And he said to me, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready for that. Let's do it. And he did. There's something in us that says, wait a minute, that's not fair. I've been following Jesus for 40 years, for 50 years, for 70 years, and somebody who lived this crazy life for 70 years, and at the end, he still gets in? And the answer is, yeah. It doesn't make sense. It makes my head explode. And it ought to make yours explode. Because that is this mystery of grace and why it's so compelling. Because we know what we're made of. And God says, my grace is for you and you and you. For you, all of us. How can you not get fired up over that? To me, that's just the most amazing, amazing kind of thing. Jesus was an includer, not an excluder. And this is so true for who he is. And this, to me, is this idea of not getting what we deserve. This is what I call the scandalous mathematics of grace. 2 + 2 doesn't always equal 4 when it comes to grace. Because God gives more than we deserve. It's just plain true. So how do we become, as followers of Jesus, more graceful? I think this is really, really important. And there's going to be some questions of reflection. We're going to go to that here in just a second. But I want to give a story that might help us put together this whole idea of judgment and grace. And it's a classic kind of story that maybe you've heard in one form or another. Imagine you don't have wheels, and you've got to get across town here in Tucson, and so you get onto a bus on Speedway. You're minding your own business. You're by yourself and stuff, and you're just sitting there on the bus. The bus stops, and a dad apparently gets on the bus with 2 kids about this size. Those kids are crazy out of control. Crazy out of control, okay? You're minding your own business. You're sitting back, you're not going to say anything, but these kids are hanging from the bus. They're doing all sorts of things. They're getting in people's business, and they're running up and down and so on, and you're just frustrated as can be, and you're getting angry and so on, and it keeps on going and escalating, and this dad is absolutely oblivious. It's like he doesn't even know what's going on. And finally, you can't take it anymore. That's it. Final straw. And you get up from your seat, you go over to the dad, and you say, would you please get control of your children? This dad just kind of shakes his head and said, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My wife and their mom just passed away at the hospital. We're going home. And I'm just kind of out of it, and I'm sure they're out of it too. I'm so sorry. I sure didn't mean to cause a problem. What just happened right now in your thinking? You went from a place of judgment, of saying, come on, any kind of parent would do something to control those kids. And what changed? Because now you feel your heart be merciful and graceful to the loss that they're experiencing. This is what happened. You got the rest of the story. So many times we lean into judgment before we get the rest of the story. And Jesus, in this whole teaching on being more graceful, is to first and foremost promise yourself to get the rest of the story and lean into that. Because you'll find grace welling up inside of you. And did you know that a person full of grace is a magnet? Everybody wants to hang with a person like that. I guarantee it. And nobody wants to hang with a person full of judgment. Now, there are 4 reflective questions. The first one has to do with getting the rest of the story. There were 4 of them. But there's something that we're all going to do here that we want you to do. And let me set this up a little bit. Whenever in the scriptures, God wanted people to remember something, there was often a physical symbol. Because by nature, I forget everything. By nature, we forget everything. I wear a wedding ring to remember the most amazing day in my life. We celebrate communion because I think God instituted that so that we would never forget. And the key word on communion is remembrance. In the same way, to have a reminding token about this message can be huge. You'll find spread out all over the place, in the back, up here in the front, smooth stones. And the encouragement of Damascus Road, of DR here, is that each of us pick up a stone and we write out, just for us, this is for nobody else, it's just for us, this is for you, maybe an area of judgment that you need to lay down. You need to lay it down. It'll be a reminder to you that I've maybe lived here, but I no longer want to do it. I want to lay it down.